Before you look at my thumbnail and freak out, I want you guys to realize that Mikal Bridges was the Defensive Player of the Year favorite for a lot of people last year. Marcus Smart, who won the award, and respectively, congratulations to him, wasn't even on the top three for many people. For a lot, it was between Bam and Mikal. And a lot of people had Mikal winning because that is how good and versatile he was as a defensive wing. And if we go off of last year as a whole, which may include some of the Phoenix Suns time as well, he was 13th in the league in matchup difficulty. He was 14th in the league in defensive isolation possessions per 75. Stats from B-Ball Index. He was on the island most of the time with the best scorer on the team. And he was a Defensive Player of the Year finalist 2 years ago, not last year. But now that he is with Brooklyn, now that he has had a chance to shine, had a chance to show his bag a little bit, a bag he said wasn't even existent at the time. If he on the Paul George podcast, he said these are things he had to develop. He was always a role player. He always played, pass, pass cut kind of basketball. Isolation has never been his game, but he worked on it. And even before he went to Brooklyn, you saw it. In the times where Devin Booker was out and he had to step up, he was amazing. I mean, even before Brooklyn, all his numbers skyrocketed. 2 point attempts per game, 3 point attempts per game, shots per game, points per. He was averaging around 17 and a half before he left. So this isn't just a thing that he's just chucking shots. He developed this. He came into the year becoming this player. But now, the difference that I've seen in looking at some of the statistics, he no longer cuts to the rim. I think that was more of like an off-ball thing, but he doesn't have that many shots at the rim anymore. One thing that has skyrocketed throughout the year, though, is his mid-range. He has mastered that, and specifically with Brooklyn, he has mastered his mid-range shot. And that has allowed him and opened up the rest of his game because he is also shooting more threes, in which it comes with the responsibility. But why in my thumbnail I have him next to PG and Kawhi? And I also wanted to throw Jimmy Butler in there, but it just didn't fit. It was too much going on. We haven't seen a wing since those three were younger that have been constantly in an all defensive team and all NBA conversation. And I know Kawhi Leonard is the ceiling. 2-time Finals MVP. If he played a full season, I think in his last year with the Spurs, he would have won MVP. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. I think Mikal should have one on his belt. Paul George, all defensive team. Jimmy Butler with the Bulls, all defensive team. These were young wings who at first didn't, all three of them, didn't come into the league shooting a lot of shots. Didn't come into the league just isoing. Didn't come into the league, Paul George did, but he didn't come into the, swifty handles, guard, like, one thing they knew, one thing that got them on the court, one thing that earned them their stain was defense. Defense got Jimmy Butler on the court. Defense got Kawhi Leonard on the court. Defense got Paul George on the court, and which Paul George has come out and said on his podcast. Well, if you haven't listened to it, it's an amazing podcast, man. But defense was their niche or niche, however you say it. That's what allowed them to have the ability to every now and then show a sprinkle in the ISO, sprinkle in the bucket, and little by little, they were able to open up their game, and Mikal is trended towards that. And no, I'm not saying that he's going to be what Kawhi Leonard was in his prime. I think people truly forget how good Kawhi was right before he left the Spurs. That Spurs team with LaMarcus, Timmy D's last year, they won 67 games. 67. And we're one of the best home teams of all time. Yes, the same year the Warriors broke the record. And if you don't know, in that playoffs, the Spurs were up by 20 points in game one before Kawhi Leonard got injured. Prime Kawhi was something different. And prime Paul George as well. Prime Paul George went head to head with one of the best teams ever assembled. in our current generation in the Miami Heat, head to head with them, with role players. Nobody else on his team was of the caliber of what Dwayne Wade was to LeBron James. But he went head to head with them. And he broke out. And not only did he do it on the offensive end, but every time he scored a bucket, he was waiting almost at half court to play defense. And man, Jimmy Butler, once Derrick Rose left, and he had that weird year with Dwayne Wade and Rajon Rondo, he was a dog. A dog. His first year with Miami, even though he's like what Jimmy Butler has added to his legacy in the past couple years has been amazing. But that first year in Miami, something to remember, man. Individual play, something to remember. Because what he was able to do on both ends. And Mikal Bridges, I wholeheartedly believe, can trend towards that. Why? Because he knows one thing about a star, and I'll talk about this with James Harden. You can't, if you're not going to be on the ball all the time, right? You have to learn how to play off the ball. You have to be able to get a couple passive buckets, I'm gonna say, because when you're the star, most of it is isolation. Couple passive buckets. And one thing Mikal Bridges has done in all his years before Brooklyn is score off the ball at a very efficient rate. One of the best corner three-point shooters in the league when he was next to Booker. One of the best catch and shoot players. And if he can get a couple buckets a game doing that passively off the ball and sprinkle in his isolation game, he could put up 26, 27. Because even this season, a lot of his points, if you've seen it, he showed the fact that he can score without the ball in his hands. And as a star, you need that. If he's going to, and I'm saying he needs that because of the other side of the ball as well. If he's going to remain a top defensive player in the league, he cannot afford to try to ISO every time down the court. He has to sprinkle in the off ball. He has to sprinkle in the corner three. He has to sprinkle in the backdoor cut. And he has shown the ability to do that. So that is why with all confidence, I'm going to say that this year Mikal Bridges is going to break out into stardom. Call me crazy. Say it's a fluke. I didn't see anything with the Brooklyn Nets that showed me any signs of flukage. I seen the same thing he was doing in Phoenix this year at a higher volume. And that's it. A couple more shots a game. And if the defense regresses a little bit, he could still make a defensive team off his name alone, off his reputation, off his reputation alone. If he is a good defender, he'll still make a team. He doesn't have to be the defender that he was 2 years ago with the Suns. But I'm telling you, you better tune into the Nets this year. You better tune into the Nets this year. Because someone who's going to creep into that Mikal Bridges role, Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson is going to have more volume now. He's going to, that team is going to be exciting this year. Very exciting. Because the fact that Mikal Bridges he said he's trying to incorporate more, not strictly ISOs, pick and rolls, backdoor cut, whatever. I'm also very excited for Nick Claxton. If Mikal Bridges can excel his playmaking to the point where he described it, it's going to be a good year. An exciting year. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs. But they could be a fringe play-in team without having put too much thought into the rest of the roster. So yes, bro. Mikal Bridges, those two players that he's into the thumbnail in, can be very reminiscent of them this year. It's me, your boy B-Riff. God bless. See you.